Hello, everyone. This is my debut of my hopefully long series of videos about my collecting vinyl and my vinyl collection and things related to vinyl and music. Um, the debut, and I hope I'll interest a few of you. I'm not trying to turn into some, YouTube blockbuster here. This is just I'm sharing my experience and my love for music, and in particular, uh, music that is on vinyl as opposed to other formats. So, as this title implies, this is about how I rebooted my vinyl collection. A little bit of history. This has probably been the case with many of us. Uh, and that was in my early teens and into my college years. I was collecting vinyl, I was buying records, and I had accumulated probably quite a few, somewhere between maybe two to 300. The first one I ever bought, a lot of people say, yeah, I can remember that first record I ever bought. And I can't. Um, Maybe it was because of the 70s. I don't know. Anyway, I remember some of the first albums that I bought because I think I started, I was listening to my brother's vinyl collection, as early as 1966 and 67. And so I was exposed to a lot of music when I was like 9 years old, that probably not many other 9 year olds were being exposed to, such as one of the first albums I ever heard was Frank Zappa's Absolutely Free. So I started buying, I think, when I was around 12 years old, and which would have been 1970. And I can remember at that time some albums that were coming out uh, that I and my friends were like really, really into. And one of them from that era, of course, is this one, Black Sabbath, the debut album, which was just, it still is a remarkable album. It is just um, incredible, and it was a sound unlike anything I had heard at that time. I had listened to some Cream and other bands of similar vein, but the Black Sabbath really really blew my mind. So that could have been the first one I bought, but I can't be sure. you know. Another one that I might have purchased, although I think my brother probably had this, would have been this one, King Crimson, in the Court of the Crimson King. Again, we're talking, for a 12-year-old listening to this, it just like totally blew my mind. Um, and while 21st Century Schizoid Man is probably the most well known song on this album, um, the songs that I really, really liked were Epitaph and Moonchild. Um, Beautiful songs, chilling songs, and prophetic songs. I was listening to this material for uh, not just its musical value, but um, for its messaging. That was very important to me. But I think that was probably my brother's album. I don't think I bought that one right away. I do remember going to Kmart, okay, and this was being released. So I know this was an early one that I bought in 1970. So when I was 12 years old, I had heard Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. I did not own them. My brother had them. This was my first Led Zeppelin album that I owned, and to this day, it is my favorite. I Maybe it's because it's the first one I own, but it is my favorite by far. Um, the song and was also, and I may cover this in a future video, was also the album in which Led Zeppelin was coming into their own in terms of songwriting. I mean, one and two, there's a lot of rip-offs of blues songs and hooks and things that they never gave credit to any of the originators. And in this album, they start to do that and also craft their own. Um, Again, I mean, ever since my brother let me listen to some early Zappa, like in the 60, 68, 69, I've always been a Mothers and Zappa fan. Just find it incredible music. So I know another early album. I don't know if it was the first that I bought at that time would have been this one here, just another band from L.A. You know, for a 12 to 14-year-old, uh, the prurient lyrics of Billy the Mountain, and even some of the other songs, of course, you know, for a young teenager, certainly very titillating. And a lot of my friends at that time were, you know, very much into that. This could have been one too. Um, this is, I do remember this one though as being the first album I listened to after not just smoking pot, but actually getting high on pot. I had smoked it several times before and felt nothing. And this was like the first album in which I listened to it and I was high. And then this one easily could have been, and this is a really significant album from that era. You know that I bought. It made me a lifelong Neil Young fan, and I pretty much bought it on a lark. I didn't know anything about Neil Young, um, but this album had a profound impact on me. And in fact, in some of my high school classes, I wrote analyses on the lyrics in some of these songs. Um, I just, you know, think they're just absolutely brilliant. So you know, but over the years, I did collect somewhere between 200 to 300 albums, and it got really tiresome to lug them around whenever I was moving. And I moved around a lot, and not just across town, across the country. So carrying all these records, my stereo equipment was bad enough to be dragging that around and carefully, you know, packaging that for travel. I mean, those speakers behind me, I bought those in roughly 1980. So I've had them since 1980, and they do me really, really well. Um, but when I got so tired, it would have been about the 90s, early 90s, when CDs, you know, were ubiquitous. That's when I traded in all my vinyl so that I could get store credit to get CDs. And so for many years after that, I was exclusively listening to CDs, no more vinyl. And initially, I thought CDs were really, really cool. It's a great format, it takes up less room. So when I'm moving around, it's just a lot easier to move from one place to another with CDs than it is lugging around heavy, heavy vinyl. Well, um, so that was the case for you know, many, many years, and then sometime around 1990. In fact, it was, or excuse me, not 1990. It was 2010. I still had the receipt, so I remember I was visiting a friend in Boston, and we went into a record store, and he was kind of dabbling a little bit in vinyl, but he was pretty focused in CDs as well. And so I'm looking at stuff in the store, and I get this idea. wouldn't it be cool to have a couple albums that, you could frame and, hang on the wall? So it was interesting because I saw they had this. And I used to have this, and so I bought it, and it still got the price tag down here. Paid $35 for it. This would have been 2010. It's got the original poster and the original booklet. And I thought, okay, plus it's the, United Artist label. And I thought, okay, this will be pretty cool to put in a frame. And then I saw another one that I thought, oh, this would be cool too, because, Delaney and Bonnie from, with Eric Clapton, one of the, many of the ventures that he was involved in after Cream and Blind Faith. I thought I used to have this one, but I was mistaken. The one that I used to have actually was this one, Motel Shot, which I eventually acquired, as you can see. So, but again, the idea was I was going to frame these as wall decorations. Well, let me take a pause here and have a sip of my Manhattan. I never framed them. They just started traveling around with me like my records used to. I was still very much buying CDs. Well, then I moved to Chicago and I was at a record store or a music store, very big one here. It's called Reckless Records, it's actually based in London. Anyway, I went there a lot to buy CDs. They had a great, huge selection of new and used CDs. And I noticed they had a vinyl section, and it was getting bigger as I was returning to the store, every month or so. They were getting more and more vinyl, and people were looking at it and buying it. And I'm like, wow, is vinyl making a comeback or something? I didn't know. So I started browsing through the records, and I saw this one, and on Bizarre label. So Zap, this is a compilation of many artists, most of whom, if not all of them, artists that Zappa at some point or another produced one of their albums. And I saw that, and I was like, man, I remember when I sent in the $1 to Warner Brothers to get this record, and they sent it back. They were called Lost Leaders, I think, and I have a couple of these now, but I had several of them, back in the early '70s when I had my vinyl, and I saw that, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, nostalgic, and I started wondering, oh my God, do I dare start buying vinyl again? And so I kind of asked some friends and talked about it. And there's a DJ that I know, um, not personal friends with him, but we're acquaintances. And he suggested to me that if I wanted to do that, what I should do is not go out and buy a turntable right away. Because when I got rid of my records, I got rid of my turntable. I can't even remember what kind of turntable I had. Um, he recommended that I start buying the records and slowly build a small collection so that when I do buy a turntable, then I'll have, 30 records that I can listen to. And I won't be playing the same record over and over and over again until I go out and buy new ones. And that's what I started to do. I made up my mind that yes, I am going to start collecting vinyl again. And that's what I did after I acquired somewhere around 30 albums. That's when I bought a new turntable. And when it came in the mail, oh, that was hilarious too, trying to set it up because, you know, God knows how many years was it the last time I set up a turntable? That was like, just suffice to say, I did it wrong the first time in terms of balancing the tone arm. Um, and I kept thinking that there was something wrong with the records because it kept skipping, and no, it was because I had the tone arm tracking and weight wrong. Uh, so you learn. Um, but then that's how I got started. And so now I look, look behind me. There's some of my collection that I have built up since I started and seeing these. And I'm thinking this was 2016. I think it was. No, it was the fall of 2017 is when I saw the album Zap. So in just 3 years, uh, I've gone from having zero vinyl to now a little more than 800 LPs. That first year was crazy. I spent a lot of money. And I learned a lot because I did spend more money than I needed to on some of my acquisitions. I way overpaid. Um, but I'm glad that I got what I did. And of course, I started focusing on the albums that I remembered owning myself. I wanted them back. And I started making a list, and I still keep a list on my phone. And it got so long that I had to recategorize that. So there's like essential albums in my current shopping list, and blues records that I want, and funk and soul albums that I want, and then Zappa pressings, because Zappa is the one category where I'm really interested in not just having each album in the catalog, but the various significant pressings of each album. So, that's, the collection just started growing. I'm a little more moderate now, not much. I still spend way too much money on records. Um, but I love what I have, and I am really enjoying collecting them again. I like having them. I like listening to them. Um, I do like the sound of vinyl better than CDs. That's my preference. Scientifically, CDs technically sound better because it's closer to live than vinyl. But they're compressed, a lot of them, so the sonic range or whatever is it gets squashed, and you don't get that breadth of the sound that you do in an analog recording on vinyl. Um, and the fact that you think that the sound coming from that record is because of that needle tracking through all those, it just blows my mind all the time. Every time I think about it, it's like, wow. And they came up with this technology more than 100 years ago. And it's still the same technology. Um, Perhaps master recordings are a little bit different. But anyway, that's how I rebooted my collection. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you stick around. I hope you'll see some of my earlier videos kind of like, because I was experimenting with a lot of different things. There's nothing too weird in there. So, I mean, if you want to look at them, whatever. But I hope you subscribe to this channel and continue to watch my videos. Leave some comments. Maybe, what was your first album, if you can remember? How did you get collecting? Do you still have your original collection from when you started back in the 60s or the 70s or even earlier? Did you do the same thing as I did? Start a collection, then sell them for CDs, and then start again? Or are you brand new in collecting? And we're going to have lots of videos with different subjects. I know there's a lot of vinyl video out there on YouTube, and there are some really good channels I watch and learn a lot from them. Um, but as I said, I'm not trying to get famous. I'm just trying to share, my experience collecting and the neat things that I find. And I hope to share a little more information about some of the records that I have with you that may even make them more interesting than you ever thought. So, thank you very much. Click subscribe, leave a comment, and enjoy music whenever you can.